sir? We can go ahead? Okay, thanks. So you can open. Good morning, and welcome to another of the Planning Institute of Jamaica's quarterly press briefings, where you will receive estimates, preliminary estimates on the performance of the economy. And today we're looking for the period October to December 2024. Welcome to our journalists who are here with us in person, and we welcome persons who are on the Zoom platform and also listening on YouTube. Just a few notes that the meeting will be recorded and later placed on the PIOJ YouTube, so in case you don't catch all of it, you can go back and watch it there. We are monitoring the chat and the video screens for comments or any questions that you may wish to put to the presenters at the end of their presentations, and your mics and your videos will be put in the off until that section of the program. Journalists who are online, do expect as normal that the materials will be sent to you by email, and all the materials will be on the PIOJ website at the end of this presentation. I'll remind you that that is www.pioj.gov.jm. In a few moments, you'll be listening to the voice of our chairman for today's proceedings, the Senior Director, Corporate Marketing and Communications, Mrs. Marcia Blake Hall. Welcome and thank you again.
Ladies and gentlemen of the media and those joining us virtually, thanks for joining us at the Planning Institute of Jamaica quarterly press briefing. Today, the Director General, Dr. Wayne Henry, will provide preliminary estimates on the performance of the economy for the October to December 2024 period. Dr. Henry is supported by Mr. James Stewart, Senior Director, Economic Planning and Research Division. At the end of the presentation, as indicated by Gwyneth, we will take your questions. Dr. Henry.
Thank you very much, Marcia. Good morning, everyone. Before I provide the details on economic performance, let me take this opportunity to remind you of the purpose of these quarterly economic estimates provided by the PIOJ. The PIOJ presents preliminary estimates on economic performance for each quarter, approximately 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed. This is based on the latest available information from major data providers. This release of the preliminary estimate is consistent with protocols in modern societies globally, where it is a common practice to release preliminary estimates before the final official figures are published. In the case of Jamaica, the PIOJ releases the preliminary growth estimate within the first 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed, and Statin releases the official GDP figures at the end of the 3rd month following the quarter being reviewed. The preliminary outturn is used by various stakeholders, including our international development partners, the private sector, as well as the government, for whom the magnitude and direction of sectoral performance is critical to inform planning and policy-related decisions. Today, we are reporting an estimated contraction in real value added of 1.8% for the October to December 2024 quarter, relative to the corresponding quarter of 2023. The estimated outturn for the review quarter largely reflected the impact of the lingering effects of Hurricane Beryl from the previous quarter, coupled with Tropical Storm Raphael and other hydrological events during the review quarter. Combined, these shocks negatively impacted the performance of the electricity and water supply, agriculture, forestry and fishing, and the related wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery and equipment industries. Additionally, challenges faced by some airlines to provide adequate air seats to and from Jamaica stymied the performance of the hotels and restaurants and other services industries. A further contraction in output was tempered by 1, high levels of employment, which strengthened domestic demand for some goods and services, and 2, increased business and consumer confidence associated with favorable perceptions about current conditions and prospects for expansion in business and job opportunities. Real sector developments. Developments in the goods producing industry. The goods producing industry is estimated to have contracted by 4.7% due to lower output in all four industries, namely agriculture, forestry and fishing, mining and quarrying, manufacturing and construction. Agriculture. Real value added for the agriculture, forestry and fishing industry was estimated to have declined by 12%. This downturn reflected a decline in hectares reaped by 8.2% and lower output per hectare for 7 of 9 domestic crop groups. The outturn was a result of damage to crops as well as delays in reaping and replanting caused by the series of hydrological events. The industry's performance was due to lower output in all subcomponents of the industry, with the exception of animal farming. The other agricultural crops component was estimated to have contracted by 5.2%, reflecting lower production in 7 of the 9 crop groups, led by plantains down 46.6%, cereals down 19.1%, condiments down 12.2%, legumes down 12.1%, and vegetables down 8.5%. Lower output was also recorded for traditional export crops, which fell by 45.9%, largely due to reduced production of cocoa, down 62.2%, coffee, down 24.2%, and banana, down 47.7%. Due to a late start of the crop season, there was no sugarcane production during the review quarter, relative to 18.6 kilotons produced during the corresponding quarter of 2023. Post-harvest activities were estimated to have contracted by 25.8%, largely reflecting decreases in coffee and cocoa production. A further decline in the industry was tempered by increased output in the animal farming component, which was estimated to have grown by 5.9% due to higher broiler meat production, up 10.2%, which outweighed a 17.3% reduction in egg production. Mining and quarrying. Real value added for the mining and quarrying industry declined by an estimated 3.2%, reflecting a fall in alumina and crude bauxite production. The quarrying component also declined, reflecting a downturn in production of most industrial materials. And alumina production was down by 1.5% due to reduced demand. The alumina capacity utilization rate decreased to 38.4%, down 0.6 percentage points, compared with the corresponding quarter of 2023. Crude bauxite production fell by 21.2%. Consequently, the bauxite capacity utilization rate decreased to 25.8%, down 6.9 percentage points. For the quarrying sub-industry, 7 of the 10 industrial minerals categories recorded declines. The most significant absolute declines were recorded for sand and stone, down by 240.5 kilotons to 19.4 kilotons, and pozzolan, for which there was no production, relative to 65.8 kilotons in the corresponding quarter of 2023. Manufacturing. The manufacturing industry was estimated to have contracted by 0.7%, stemming from lower output in the other manufacturing sub-industry, which outweighed an estimated growth in the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry. The contraction in the other manufacturing sub-industry reflected lower production in the petroleum products sub-industry. This was largely attributed to a reduction in the refinery service factor, as the refinery was closed for 39 days during the review quarter, relative to 32 days in the corresponding quarter of 2023. Data revealed that lower production was recorded for 4 of the 6 products surveyed, including liquid petroleum gasoline, LPG, down 43.5%, Other petroleum products down 38.6%, turbo fuel down 16.6%, and fuel oil down by 11.5%. The growth in the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry reflected higher production for rum and alcohol up 2.8%, edible oils up 2.9%, poultry meat up 9.3%, and condensed milk up 58.3%. A further expansion was stymied by no production of sugar and molasses, and lower production of dairy products and edible fats. Construction. Real value added for the construction industry was estimated to have contracted by 2.1%, reflecting an estimated contraction in both the building construction and other construction components of the industry. The industry's performance reflected a real decline in sales of construction-related inputs. The fall-off in the building construction component was due mainly to the performance of the residential category, reflected in a 19% downturn in housing starts by the NHT. Additionally, the total value of mortgages disbursed by the NHT declined by 24.2% to $6.2 billion. The downturn in the other construction component was due to a decline in capital expenditure on civil engineering activities, largely stemming from, 1, National Works Agency, which disbursed $1.4 billion relative to $4.9 billion in the corresponding quarter of 2023. The fall in expenditure reflected the winding down of roadwork activities associated with the South Coast Highway Improvement Project, SCHIP, as well as the impact of hydrological events which hindered ongoing work. And 2, JPS, which disbursed $3.4 billion, down from $4.8 billion in the corresponding quarter of 2023. Disbursements during the quarter included expenditure on the repair and reinstallation of electricity generation and distribution infrastructure. A further contraction in the other construction component was tempered by increased disbursement by NROC, which disbursed $2.8 billion, up 34.9% relative to the corresponding quarter of 2023. Expenditure during the review period was primarily for the Montego Bay Perimeter Road and the Southern Coast Highway Improvement Project, SCHIP. Developments in the services industry. The services industry was estimated to have contracted by 0.7% relative to the corresponding quarter of 2023, reflecting lower real value added for 5 of the 8 industries. Producers of government services was estimated to have remained flat. Electricity and water supply. The electricity and water supply industry was estimated to have recorded a decline in real value added of 1.4% due to lower electricity consumption. Electricity consumption fell by 2.2% due to lower consumption in all 6 categories. Reduced sales were recorded for residential, down 1.1%, general service, that's small businesses using less than 25 kilovolt ampere kVA, was down 2%. Power service, that's large businesses using more than 25 kVA but less than 500 kVA, was down 2.5%. Large power, businesses using more than 500 kVA, was down 2.2%. Largest power, that's single locations with a minimum peak demand of 2,000 kVA, was down 6.6%, and street lighting and traffic signals was down 0.3%. In contrast to the decrease in electricity consumption, water consumption increased by 2% due to higher water consumption in the Eastern Division, up 3%, and the Western Division, up 0.1%. Transport, storage, and communication. Real value added for transport, storage, and communication grew by 1% due to higher levels of activities in the communication component of the industry. This outturn was largely driven by increases in telephone and subscriber television services. The transport and storage component is estimated to have declined. A downturn in air transport reflected a reduction in total passenger movement by 2.7% due to departures, down 3.2%, and arrivals, down 1.9%. The fall in air travel stemmed from a 2.3% decrease in aircraft movement. Maritime transport was also estimated to have declined. This was the result of a 5.6% reduction in total cargo movement and a 5% decrease in total vessel visits. Wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, WR trim. Real value added for the wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, WR trim industry, was estimated to have contracted by 1.2% due to lower sales recorded for 4 of the 8 categories in real terms, including wholesale and repair of household goods and office equipment, down 15.6%, hardware, building supplies, and electrical goods and machinery, down 7.4%, minerals, fuels, lubricants, and petroleum products, down 7.3%, and retail sale of pharmaceuticals, medical goods, and cosmetics, down 2.4%. Finance and insurance services. Real value added for the finance and insurance services industry was estimated to have grown by 1%. This performance was influenced by increased revenue at deposit-taking institutions earned from net interest income and fees and commission. This was supported by high levels of employment and increases in both business and consumer confidence, up 7.3% and 0.2% respectively. Hotels and restaurants. Real value added for the hotels and restaurants industry was estimated to have contracted by 2.5%. Preliminary data for the quarter revealed that stopover arrivals decreased by 1.6%. Visitor arrivals to the island continued to be negatively impacted by the impact of a fall in airlifts due to supply-side issues with Boeing. 2 travel advisories issued during 2024, and to a lesser extent, industrial disputes which halted operations at some hotels. Total visitor expenditure was estimated to have fallen by 2.1% to US $1.1 billion during the quarter. GDP performance for January to December 2024. For calendar year 2024, real value added was estimated to have contracted by 0.9%. This reflected lower real value added for both the goods producing industry, down 2.3%, and the services industry, down 0.3%. Within goods producing, all industries recorded lower output levels, led by agriculture, forestry, and fishing, down 3.4%, and construction, down 2.8%. For the services industry, all industries declined with the exception of electricity and water, transport, storage, and communication, finance and insurance services, and hotels and restaurants. Employment update. Regarding the employment update, the October 2024 labor force survey undertaken by the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, Statin, represents the 4th report since the new series began. Recall that Statin indicated that the January 2024 labor force survey, LFS, represented a break in the data series to incorporate the recommendations from the 19th, 20th, and 21st International Conferences of Labor Statisticians of the International Labour Organization, ILO. Consequently, the October 2024 labor force data is not comparable with the report for the corresponding period of 2023. Notwithstanding, the highlights of the October 2024 labor market survey are as follows. The unemployment rate was 3.5%, with male unemployment rate at 2.6% and female unemployment rate at 4.5%. The youth unemployment rate was 11%, with male youth unemployment at 8.9% and female youth unemployment at 13.7%. The employed labor force stood at 1,417,000 persons as at October 2024. Males accounted for 768,500, or 54.2% of the employed labor force, with females at 648,400, or 45.8%. The unemployed labor force was 51,300 persons as at October 2024. Looking at the short-term economic outlook, January to March 2025 and fiscal year 2024-25. Generally, the prospects for the Jamaican economy for the short to medium term are positive, based on, one, an expectation that the economy will return to growth during the January to March 2025 quarter. This performance will be supported by continued growth in the economies of Jamaica's main trading partners, which augurs well for increased external demand, higher domestic demand stemming from increased employment levels, increased economic activities spurred by higher levels of business and consumer confidence as firms continue to invest to meet higher domestic and external demand, and continued recovery in the industries that were most significantly impacted by the hydrological events, and that's expected to reduce the drag on growth. Preliminary data on the mining and quarrying industry for January 2025 indicate that total bauxite production grew by 3.8%, reflecting the combined impact of a 20% increase in crude bauxite production and a 6.2% decline in alumina production. For the hotels and restaurants industry, preliminary data on airport arrivals for January 2025 showed that there was a decline of 1% relative to January 2024. The downside risks to this positive outlook include, one, plant downtime due to relatively aged equipment in major industries, two, slow implementation of capital projects, and three, weaker than projected growth in the economies of Jamaica's main trading partners, which may temper the external demand for Jamaica's goods and services. Within this context, economic growth is anticipated for the final quarter of fiscal year 2024-25. For the January to March 2025 quarter, growth is projected to be within the range of 0.1% to 1%. However, for fiscal year 24-25, the economy will contract within the range of 0.5% to 1.5%. So in summary, preliminary data indicate that the Jamaican economy contracted, largely reflecting the negative impact of losses and damages suffered as a result of several hydrological events on productive activities. With Jamaica recording at least 2 consecutive quarters of economic contraction, there has been some attention given to the concept of whether the country is currently experiencing an economic recession. Let me provide some clarity on the issue. In economics, a recession is defined as a contraction in the business cycle and can be described as a significant slowdown in economic activity. Generally, as a rule of thumb, it is considered that 2 consecutive quarters of decline in a country's seasonally adjusted real GDP represents a recession. The primary reason for using seasonal adjustment is to remove fluctuations in economic data, which typically repeats annually, revealing cyclical and trend movements in the economy. Seasonally adjusted GDP estimates therefore removes recurring patterns such as weather changes or holidays that affect economic activity, making it easier to observe underlying GDP growth trends across consecutive quarters. For example, retail sales rise each December due to Christmas shopping. The purpose of seasonal adjustment is to remove systemic calendar-related variation associated with the time of year, which would remove any biases in making a comparison with the previous quarter. Seasonally adjusted GDP is therefore useful in determining how an economy is performing within a year and identifying any underlying trends, for example, an emerging recession. It allows for a fair comparison across different quarters within the same year. This data is produced by Statin and released each quarter. Year-on-year GDP, on the other hand, those comparisons, as analyzed and reported on by the PIOJ, the Bank of Jamaica, and international economic institutions, are more suited for assessing the overall direction of an economy over a longer term. It is used to analyze economic performance across years and consequently provides useful information on how a country has been performing over time. The use of GDP alone to determine a recession has its shortfalls, as echoed by most macro-fiscal institutions, for example, the IMF and the World Bank, among others. Economic analysts have progressively taken a more comprehensive view of a recession, which is that a focus on GDP alone is insufficient, and it is often better to consider a wider set of measures of economic activity to determine whether a country is indeed experiencing a recession. Specifically, economic indicators such as, but not limited to, income, employment, and fiscal health should be taken into consideration to reflect a more comprehensive view of whether or not a country is facing a recession. A recession is usually accompanied by a steady rise in job losses and a significant increase in unemployment. Notably, three criteria are usually used to assess whether or not an economy is in recession. These are: 1, depth, that is, how sharp is the contraction in economic activity. 2, diffusion, that is, how widespread is the decline across industries and economic actors, for example, consumers as against businesses and government. And 3, duration, that is, how long is the decline in the macroeconomic indicators. Macroeconomic indicators such as GDP, gross domestic product, employment, real income, real sales, and so on are considered. And so with this definition in mind and the 3 criteria articulated, is Jamaica in a recession? Looking at GDP, the most widely used economic indicator, the official data from the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, Statin, shows a decline in seasonally adjusted real value added at constant prices, quarter on quarter, in the April to June and July to September 2024 quarters. This suggests that the Jamaican economy satisfied one of the criteria for a recession. There are some industries which have reported a contraction, and operators within these industries would be experiencing challenges. For example, the wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, WR trim industry has been negatively impacted by the downturn in both the agriculture, forestry and fishing, and hotels and restaurants industries. The WR trim industry accounts for the largest share of GDP, approximately 17% as at September 2024, and is the single largest employer of labor at 18.7% as at October 2024. And this implies that operators in the industry, for example, micro and small businesses, would have experienced more challenges than operators in other industries that continued to grow. Note, however, that employment in the WR trim industry continued to increase during the period, increasing by 100 persons in July 2024 relative to April 2024, and by a further 400 persons in October 2024 relative to July 2024. The primary reasons for these quarterly contractions were the shocks to the economy as a result of Hurricane Beryl in July 2024 and the subsequent hydrological events, including Tropical Storm Raphael in November 2024. Given the nature of these shocks, it is likely that the impact will be temporary and will be reversed in the near term. Examining the other official data from Statin on Jamaica's unemployment rate, another widely used economic indicator of a recession, we get a different picture. The unemployment rate for October 2024 is 3.5%, and employers have also lamented challenges and shortages in filling some vacant positions. This suggests that despite the temporary contraction in output, the labor market continues to remain robust and may be considered a lead indicator of a return to growth in the short term. This is also supported by the most recent data on business and consumer confidence levels, which indicate positive sentiments by both consumers and businesses regarding current and future economic prospects. It is therefore the PIOJ's assessment that the Jamaican economy, though facing a downturn in economic output, is not in a recession. However, there remain significant challenges due to hydrological shocks, reflected largely in the fallout in tourism, electricity and water supply, and agriculture, forestry, and fishing. Based on the most recent data and information available, the PIOJ is projecting that the economy will return to positive output performance, that is growth, in the January to March 2025 quarter. We will continue to monitor and track developments in the economy and will update our assessment as new data becomes available. Another key development, which the PIOJ is keenly tracking, is the potential impact of the measures being implemented by the new United States administration. We can agree that it is too early to determine impact, as the precise nature and magnitude of these changes are still being announced and rolled out. However, these new US policies may have a significant impact on Jamaica, particularly in areas such as trade, foreign aid, and immigration. With respect to trade, the United States is Jamaica's largest trading partner, and changes in US trade policies can directly affect the Jamaican economy. The potential imposition of tariffs would have an adverse impact on domestic inflation as well as Jamaica's export performance, as competitiveness could be eroded. With respect to foreign aid and assistance, the United States foreign aid programs play a role in supporting Jamaica's development efforts. Effective January 20, 2025, the US instituted a 90-day pause on all foreign aid pending a review, following the issuance of an executive order. This has impacted the implementation of programs in Jamaica, supported by US foreign development assistance. With respect to immigration policies, changes in US immigration policies will impact Jamaican citizens, especially those seeking to work, study, or live in the United States. Tighter immigration controls can reduce opportunities for Jamaicans. With regard to climate and health policies, the US's withdrawal from international climate and health bodies and/or agreements, as in the Paris Agreement and the WHO, the World Health Organization, may affect global initiatives that Jamaica participates in, potentially impacting environmental and health-related projects. And finally, with respect to economic impact, policies of the new US administration may have a direct impact on Jamaica's economy. For example, policies that influence household employment, incomes, and overall economic stability may affect the flow of remittances from the United States. The Planning Institute of Jamaica will continue to closely monitor these developments and assess the likely effects on the economy as soon as the measures are fully implemented. In closing, I want to recognize a very dedicated and hardworking team here at the PIOJ. I encourage us all to sustain our efforts to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. May God bless you all. May God continue to bless Jamaica land we love. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Henry. The floor is now open for questions. You may use the raise hand feature or type in the chat, after which you will be identified. After you have been identified, please give your name and the organization you are representing. And I see we have a question for you, DG.
My name is Andrew Laidley, representing the Jamaica Information Service. Dr. Henry, wanted you to share your thoughts on, in what ways do you believe the national budget for the upcoming fiscal year will affect or impact the economy within the context of consecutive contractions, as you've just mentioned, economic contractions?
All right, thank you, Andrew. So the budgets are typically intention signals of the government's in policy and policy directions. And we are seeing in a context of contractions in the economy, we have seen some spending contractions in the budget, but still continued emphasis on education, continued emphasis you're seeing in the build out in the health sector. And those continued emphasis, we are continuing the macro fiscal discipline of debt reduction. And I think those all go well in the context we are in. There's been an announcement of no new taxation. And I think in the context of a contracted economy, that again all goes well. And so would represent, we think, sound policy going forward. Let me ask if James wants to add anything there. But I would say, not predictable, nothing unusual in the sense, and I think that's in keeping with general sound principles. You could see some actions that would have been contrary to what you would expect, and we haven't seen that at all. So I think the budget is, thought out, laid out according to what we would experience and be expecting at this time.
Yeah. So the only thing I would add, DG, is that the extent to which we are able to roll out our capital budget would definitely impact growth performance positively. So we are monitoring that carefully.
And so there's been, Andrew and others, just an increased attention on project implementation, the process by which we determine feasibility of capital projects and assessments to improve efficiency there, and just continued attention on how fast, as James has said, how fast we can implement. And I think that would be very important.
Just another question from me, Director General. I noticed you mentioned the areas that could be affected from, the policies coming out of the United States. I wonder, is the Vision 2030 Secretariat giving any thought to how Vision 2030 itself might be impacted by those policies coming out of the United States?
So thank you for that also, Andrew. So the Secretariat is continuing to work, and we've been announcing and relating to the country in our previous quarterlies, as well as other activities driven by the Secretariat. We are continuing to monitor implementation of our development, our overall development trajectory and progress. And as we've mentioned, some of the US policies have the potential to impact negatively. We watch to see how they are rolled out, what exactly is rolled out and the extent. But when you think of development, you are thinking of improvements in well-being and living standards of your citizens. And so if you have initiatives that may negatively affect in the climate space, negatively affect maybe in the health sector, in the health space, then you're looking at impacts, areas that directly impact us from a development standpoint. And so we've been monitoring in terms of our progress as a country. We would have said to the country that pre-COVID, we were 67% in terms of our indicators, the range of indicators that we are measuring of progress of development. We were attaining our goal or making progress towards those goals that we've assessed. And then we are completed that assessment post-COVID. Most countries globally are doing what we call that midterm review in the run-up to 2030. And Jamaica, while we reported at the time that there had been some slippage and follow, we were still making progress in some areas and then doing relatively better than many countries. As we hear the reports being made to the UN and elsewhere, we realize, any comparison, any assessment you do a standalone assessment of where you are and the trend of where you are and where you're going, where you're coming from. So we speak of a baseline and where we are relative to that baseline, how we are doing by ourselves. And then a comparator analysis in terms of, in finance, we said the industry averages and industry analysis, looking at comparator other countries. And when we do that assessment, we realize that Jamaica is doing relatively better than many. And I say that to say that, we said in our last conference that, Vision 2030 is still a key, right? It's very important that we continue those initiatives to secure better living standards, to secure continued progress for us as a country. So when you look at the emphasis in education and with the significant fallout, like many countries that we've seen in education outcomes. We're seeing that emphasis on trying to recover and close some of those gaps. We've made progress in some of the health and mortality indicators and outcomes, mother-to-child transmission in HIV, different things that you're seeing tremendous progress, but we have other areas that we need to continue to make progress in. So we are saying that those policies in the US have the potential, as if they come out, as they continue to be rolled out, to negatively impact us, because we are, like many global takers in terms of a small island developing states, if we don't have more aggressive policies to reduce emissions, to reduce environmental pollution, etc. If you continue the trends that we are seeing in the decline in the climate space and climate health, then we are going to continue to see the projections suggest global occurrences of more severe hazards, hydrological and otherwise, more intense, more prolonged, drier periods. So many issues that the numbers, the projections are not encouraging, and so we have to fight this together. So it's going to take all of us, and especially some of the more advanced economies, helping to lead that fight. So we continue to monitor it, as you know, very closely, because these are critical areas for us.
Thank you very much, Director General. I'll allow some of my colleagues to ask questions now. I do have one or two more, but I'll give them a chance.
Okay, this one is from Kellery Miles. Good morning. Based on the output from the hotels and restaurant sector, did major entertainment events such as Freedom Street and others in any way tempered its output during the reported quarter?
So Kelly is asking if in the decline in overall tourism sector, if some of the entertainment events would have tempered that.
Yes.
And so the early indicators would suggest yes. And so they would. And the entertainment, sporting and entertainment events continue to be have positive impact on the economy. You think of boys and girls championships, you think of Gibson, we have some of our sporting events where people do engage. Even the cricket, when we have in our regional cricket and so on, we do get to host some of those matches. And so a powerful positive impact. And of course, in the entertainment sector, again, very positive. Some of our annual features or regular features in terms of in the entertainment space, very positive. And so yes, we continue to see build out by other drivers of economic development in terms of build out in the film industry, putting funding for startups and for film projects to come together. We're seeing more build out in overall the creative space. Jumper leading in some of those areas and others. So we think it continues to be very positive, Kelly and others, that we continue to promote, call it that creative industries and see if we can continue to harness. We are a tremendously talented people, very strong culture, and world-renowned, way above our size and weight, and so we think that's a tremendous area to continue to emphasize.
Thanks, DG. You may go ahead with your question now.
Thank you once again. Testing. Okay, good. All right. So, Director General, you mentioned in your presentation that some hotels halted. That was the verbiage you used. I wonder if you could provide some kind of idea of which areas these hotels were in, and are you able to quantify the fallout that occurred?
I think we'd have to do a deeper dive on something like that. We're just looking at a high level. We said to a lesser extent than some of the other.
Minuscule.
So go ahead, please, James.
Yeah, just to say that the impact would be minuscule. In most cases, it was for less than a day. So in terms of its overall impact on the industry, it would be very small. And we are not in a position to quantify that. We would need direct data from the hoteliers themselves, from the hotels themselves.
This one is from Siobhan Campbell, and he asks, prior to the economic shocks of Hurricane Beryl and Raphael, the economy showed signs of slowing. Is this an indicator of underlying weaknesses? Does it suggest the country would likely have ended up contracting regardless of the weather-related shocks?
That's difficult to answer.
Yeah, the counterfactual is hard. So thanks, Siobhan. Thanks for the question, and it would cause us to pause. We'd have to, if we recall some of our projections prior to that would be a difficult question, I think. I think so. So Siobhan, good question, first of all, and we can answer it different ways. So one, the continued robustness displayed in the labor market and that continued increase in employment and attendant strong business and consumer confidence levels. I said those have continued, those have been sustained. And so we can say, which is the same issue we've posited as we speak about the issue of where we posit Jamaica is not in a recession. So because the counterfactual then would be, Siobhan and others, if you did not have those hydrological events, if you did not have a Hurricane Beryl and a tropical storm, surely you would have seen continued strong performance, we think, just thinking about it in agriculture, forestry and the fishing in that sector, you'd have seen a continued build out in some of those large projects, the continued implementation and work. So I think it would be difficult, and somebody argue and have to say something more. You may see a weakening or a slowdown in activity, but that does not mean, downturn and recession. It doesn't mean that at all. So I wouldn't say that. I think some of the fundamentals remain very strong, and then the continued backdrop of fiscal health afforded by reduced debt and continued crowding in of the private sector, we think those continue to augur well for the economy. All right, so James, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add that although the growth rates were relatively lower than the previous year, they were in keeping with our projection for the calendar year of growth about 1%. For the 3 quarters for which we have information, January to March, we recorded growth of 1.2%. April to June, there was growth of 0.3%. And the last quarter of the preceding year was 1.7%. But we recall we had projected growth in the range of 0.5 to 1.5%. And based on how the trajectory that we were on prior to the shocks, we are of the view that we would have attained the projected growth. Yes.
Thank you for that.
And there is a follow-up question from Kelly Miles. When the economy returns to growth, at what point is it likely that we will begin to experience higher growth output that will move us out of the 1 to 2% band we seem to be stuck in for the last few years?
Kelly, good question. We continue, a lot of our efforts, and I'd say for those who join in the economic management of the country, is to secure more robust levels of growth, just as you've indicated. And so a lot of the efforts across many years, even across administration, a lot of the efforts of some people say right-sizing Jamaica's fiscal position, reducing the debt as we've seen, doing reforms to our tax structure, trying to increase access for micro and small players. Many things that add, the continued fight to increase citizen security, to reduce violent crime. Those kinds of efforts all, I think, are down to the economic development of the country. How do we secure better living standards and the well-being of our people? So that's the end game, and we continue to push in that regard. And so there have been some gains that in that regard. Easily we've mentioned a few, but there remain challenges. the continued build out in terms of education and human capital development, training our people and skilling our and training our workforce, and so is a part of that also. So all the efforts come together, and you need a healthy population to be more productive, etc. So everything hangs together. So thank you for that. James, anything to add?
Well, moving the growth rate to stronger levels would be largely dependent on increasing capacities, as you alluded to, DG, in most of our industries. We have already been seeing signs in the hotels and restaurant industries. We have seen some instances in the manufacturing industry where there have been capacity expansion. So as these continue, we can't put a time frame on it, a specific date on it, but as these developments continue to roll out, if we are able to benefit from some of the logistics-related expansions which have started, I think in due course we'll see a strengthening of our growth rate.
Thank you.
Andrew Lately again from JS. Okay, just wanted to clarify, Director General, did I hear correctly when you said the bauxite industry declined during the period under review?
Yes, it declined during October to December, but for January, the rate is positive.
Right, so I just wanted to find out what accounted for that decline.
At this stage, we don't have a lot of information, but generally there was a weakening in demand for the export.
And then my final question is with regards to arrivals. I note you mentioned airport arrivals, and I wondered about cruise arrivals, just simply because of certain reports that I heard about certain groups of people trying to boycott going to Florida, for example, to go on cruises. So I wondered if that's a disaggregate that you could get or that you have and that you might be able to share.
You are specifically referring to data since January, since the new administration?
That's correct.
Right. We do not have that in our possession as yet. But it's information we share periodically. But for this year, we have no information on cruise performance.
Thanks, Mr. Laidley. Follow-up questions from Kelly Miles. She's asking for an update on the integration of the new IGIF tool. Is it now implemented and being used to capture data?
Thank you for that, Kelly Reid. James?
The short answer is no, it is not yet fully implemented. We are working on updating the tool. We are challenged by some capacity issues internally, but it is something that we intend to prioritize in the short term.
Thanks. I have no other questions coming from the chat. So let me thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us and participating in today's press briefing. The presentation will be uploaded to our website and social media pages of the PIOJ and Vision 2030. These will be displayed on the screen. Join us again in May when we will be presenting on the performance of the January to March 2025 period. Have a good day and stay safe.